Hey, hi everybody. We are going to talk about how to begin a painting, an Alla Prima oil painting with an underpainting or imprimatura. I am going to tone my canvas, do a loose block in, and then hopefully we'll have time to move on to color. All right, I'm working on an 8 by 8 inch square panel. It's not canvas, it's actually an Arches oil paper panel made by Raymar. So it's a masonite panel with some Arches oil paper stuck right on it. And so you'll see that it's going to suck up a lot of that pigment and Gamsol that I'm washing onto it right now. I'm using a 6 flat. It's pretty soft bristle synthetic mongoose brush just to wash the canvas. And for all intents and purposes, I'm going to just call this a canvas, even though it is paper on a panel. This papery surface is going to absorb right off the bat more Gamsol and more pigment than a gessoed canvas surface would. And we won't be able to pull out lights as much as I would on a toned canvas, but that's okay. It just gives us a little bit of a different effect going forward. Okay, now that the canvas is fairly evenly toned, we've got a lot of white of that canvas shining through the pigment, so we've got a nice mid-tone. It's not opaque, it's not runny or drippy, but it's certainly not dry. I guess I could just go ahead and start the blocking with my finger, but this isn't finger painting. This is oil painting. So where do we start? I'm going to pick up my drawing brush, which is a number 2 round. This is also another synthetic mongoose brush. I am going to switch over to synthetics when I start, or synthetic flat brushes anyway, when I start adding the color here. But for washing the canvas and drawing in the composition, I really like a little bit of a softer brush. So let's see. I've got my composition somewhat framed on my cell phone, and I almost never do this, but this is just for quickness today. Generally, I'll do a sketch. I always work from life, but as far as where I want to begin and end my composition, I want to find some landmarks. Now, ordinarily, I would use a good old-fashioned plastic viewfinder for this. You can see it there in the palette screen, framing the scene, and I definitely want to do that, looking at it, framing it, making sure that what I've seen through the camera, I can replicate through my viewfinder because the camera distorts what we see with our eyes. Looks pretty good. All I'm using this for is to anchor myself to some starting points on the canvas so that I can put my reference or my viewfinder, whichever I'm using to frame my composition, away and proceed into the painting, working directly from life. This is a very cute little sugar bowl I just got. I'm getting to know it. This is our first time playing together, me and this little Fiesta-ware sugar bowl. I think it's going to be the beginning of a beautiful friendship. We have these stripes here, and I love the stripe coming up against that sugar bowl. It's not necessarily an opportunity for a lost edge because the value of the two colors, the hue is similar there, but the value is quite different. And so I may not actually have an opportunity for a lost edge in that spot, but I'm sure going to try. Okay, I don't want to get too carried away with the drawing, and like I said, at this point, once I've anchored myself to one thing, it could be a place where something crops out of the canvas. That lemon is cropping out of the top of the canvas. What else am I planning on cropping? Well, I'm going to have more cropping than I'm seeing actually in this photo, which is the same photo that you're seeing in the picture right here. But let's just see. Anyway, usually I start with a landmark that interacts with the picture plane because it can be easy to find them, just relative judging. But here I've placed the creamer, or I'm sorry, keep wanting to call it the creamer. I almost always paint creamer and almost never sugar, but they tend to come in pairs, don't they? So I have a lot of both hanging around. Sugar bowl today, Sarah. Okay. All right, so now that I've placed an anchor for myself, I can put my photo reference, I can put my viewfinder away, and I can proceed working from life. which is what I really want to be doing most of the time when I'm painting. It just, it just feels better. But also, the longer that the longer you hang on to your viewfinder, the longer you hang on to your photo reference, the longer you cling even to your thumbnail sketch. You've made your decisions in the thumbnail sketch. You're ready to move on to making the painting, and the thumbnail sketch is a guide. Once we've extracted the information from our plan, we put that away because it isn't that accurate. And it's meant to be a tool for making compositional choices. It isn't meant to be a totally accurate drawing, and mostly that's a good thing. But, we want to put it away at a certain point and work from life, refining the drawing, getting that correct information, the better information that we'll be gathering with our naked eyes here. And the camera has even less accurate information for me. So loosely, I just want to place these two, judging the distance from the bottom of the bowl. I can fudge that a little bit. It does not have to be perfect. I want everything in the composition and I want nothing cropping. I'm going to have room for stuff. I have a little wiggle room at the top. This is a little lower than I thought I wanted it, but yeah, that's a big empty space of nothing. But we do have the stripes, sort of, and I have the fabric seam there going out, which can make it nice. So this will be gray. The light, kind of light gray back there. This will be the white fabric, not easily able to pull lights. Sorry about my head. Oh, you know what? I need to adjust the exposure control. Do I? Yes, I do. Sorry. It keeps changing itself. Sorry about that. Okay. So I couldn't pull out the lights quite the way I'd be able to, but if I get a rag, wet it with Gamsol and sort of scrub them out, I can indicate to myself that, yeah, that's lighter. Yeah, that's lighter. There. Not going directly out of the corner, like so. All right, not feeling quite so empty now. I still want to move that bowl up. Maybe we'll move it up just a hair. Move everything up just a hair. Got room at the top. I'm feeling squished at the bottom. And this happens even when I have a good, pre-plan in place, when I have a real thoughtfully executed value study or thumbnail sketch. I still have to get onto the canvas and I still have to locate my stuff again. Those of you who follow me on Patreon have seen a demo of how I use a projector to do that sometimes. It seems like the older I get, the more all about tools and convenience I am. And the projector is not a substitute for being able to draw, but it does make the transfer from the compositional plan to the eventual what happens on the canvas easier, faster. This is either going to be in or out. Yeah, I guess it's going to be out. That's fine. I have a little spot of yellow back there. But don't get me wrong, I'm all about the sketch. I love a good compositional plan. It's fun to bust out the projector once in a while. It spices things up in the studio a little bit too. It gives me a bit of a different technology problem to solve than the ones I'm usually wrangling with, which are cameras, computers, and Zoom, and the various other. It's like the three horsemen of the pandemic for artists, right? Cameras, computers, and Zoom, and COVID. All right. My underpainting color, what I call my tone color, is mixed. Sometimes I use raw sienna for this. Today I'm using a mixture. On my palette here, made from cadmium yellow medium, cadmium red light, and ultramarine blue. You can really tone a canvas and do an underpainting in this technique with any color you like. I just recommend that you don't use white in your color underneath your other paint. It will mix in, it won't sink in and settle down into your surface quite as well as pigment with no white and only cut with Gamsol, thin with Gamsol to lighten. Yeah, I keep picking up other paint. This is a dirty palette. This is a palette that is not fresh for this painting, and I don't waste a lot of paint in my life because I freeze it. I store my palette in the freezer in between uses. And I work on disposable palettes, as you may have noticed here. And so periodically I do have to switch over to a clean, fresh, totally new palette. And I do that sometimes importing some pre-mixed colors or some of the outer ring colors, these colors that are around the outside edges. These are my tube colors. I am out of Hansa yellow. I'm probably going to want some more of that now that I check in with the palette. But I don't throw away a lot of dry paint because the paint doesn't dry. It stays in the freezer. It stays open. You just need to let it thaw for about 10 minutes after you pull it out. This paint I'm using now is not thick and opaque. It is thinned down with Gamsol pretty much to the consistency of ink. And I know those marks look pretty dark, but they're dark because they're still thin. They're just dark because it's a lot of pigment in there with that Gamsol, but it's pretty thin. Why don't we want thick paint in the underpainting? Because we're going to cover over this. I mean, certainly you could, and you could scrape some of it back if it was interfering with the overlayer. But the plan is to cover all of this up. This is meant to be a skeletal underpinning of the compositions there. I picked up a little bit with some darker stuff in it, and that's okay, because the next step is for me to move on to actually investigating putting a darker level into this underpainting. There's a fold in the fabric right here, which I am going to ignore. I know you can see it in the photo reference, but I'm going to just pretend it's not there. I am going to have these stripes at the bottom, and perhaps they'll be slightly unexplained. I love the way this little guy down here is just touching, and I don't even mind that the stripe is horizontal to the picture plane down there. I think I'm going to go with it. Ordinarily, I would be freaked out by that. I would think, oh no, that's not going to work. It's a compositional no-no, but I'm going to do it today and see what happens. What's the point of painting if you can't take some risks and break some rules once in a while? Yes. Feeling rebellious today. Feeling feisty. What else can I tell you? For those of you who are unfamiliar with me and my work, maybe you're just cruising around YouTube looking for some studio inspiration for the new year, it being January, looking to jumpstart your studio practice, looking to get back into painting, looking to start painting still life because maybe you are a landscape painter who has been chased inside by the winter weather. I get it. That's not me. I'm a landscape painter. I'm sorry. That's not me. I'm a still life painter all year round. But I love my landscape painters, and I love painting with them during the winter when they come inside. I teach a lot of workshops. I have some other YouTube videos. Most of my more recent videos can be found on my Patreon page. And there's a link to that in the video notes. But if you're new to me or if you're not new to me, thanks for joining me for this. Okay, I'm just continuing to firm up my drawing. And I'm about at the point where I want to delve a little more into the values. And these are all in. That one might be able to grow a little bit. I don't know. I don't really need to. Doesn't matter. He's got a little nose that points that way, and I'm not sure I want to keep that. And this guy has a very cute nose. There's a real obvious lost edge between this guy and this guy. You can probably even see it in the photo, although the camera, let me look. The camera loves to draw a line. This is why painting from life is better, even if you use that camera to help you find your composition. Putting it away and working from life, you'll see things. Your eyes can see in a painterly way. The camera cannot. Maybe someday they'll come up with a filter, the lost edge filter. Maybe they can call it the Sarah Sedwick effect, like they have the Ken Burns effect in the iMovie editor. I digress. Lost edges are a spot where two values come together. They don't have to be the same color, but if they're close enough in value that when you squint, you don't see a line in between them, you don't have to paint it. And that creates a beautiful little puzzle for your viewer to solve. They love that. That's the key to my painting style, which is called loose realism. We love looking at loose painting. We love looking at abstract painting, but we can't tell what we're looking at. Loose, realistic painting is the next best thing. We get to enjoy all that beautiful eye candy, and we get to have a story in our mind about it too. Well, maybe an abstract painting we do too, of course. What do I know? I don't know anything about abstract painting. I have probably never painted an abstract painting in my entire life. All right, so what I've done is I've added in some alizarin crimson and a little bit of ultramarine blue to my tone color, that mixture of red, yellow, and blue to make a sort of neutrally orange that looks like raw sienna. I have been known in the past to use burnt sienna for an underpainting also. That's a great option. I'm kind of not hanging out with burnt sienna anymore. I got a little tired of it. And in fact, I rarely use tube brown at all. I think brown happens to me anyway. You know, I don't have trouble creating a brown. It seems to always occur on my palette, and so I don't really need to bring in another pigment. And I like to limit the pigments on my palette as much as possible, whenever possible, taking that opportunity. I have to sort of invent that because it goes behind the stripe, but I think I'm up to the challenge. But I am out of room there. These things are growing. This is one of the problems with just jumping in, isn't it? All right, let's recalibrate. I'm gonna suck that guy back a little bit. You know, I teach a lot of composition. I teach a lot of thumbnail sketching. I teach a lot of painting planning. This is a good example of me diving in without much plan and seeing what happens and letting you guys watch. Because I'm all about passing it on. And I keep saying, you know, planning leads to better results. Planning leads to better results. And I, for years, painted this way where I would let the underpainting be my plan. I would do the underpainting and then I would assess. I would say, okay, is this working for me? Do I like what's occurring? Is it a good value plan? Is it an intriguing array of value shapes, fundamentally? But the problem was that I wouldn't really make adjustments, you know. I would do the underpainting, I would look at it, I would say, is this what I was after? Is this a pleasing arrangement of value shapes? Is this a good composition? Where's my focal point? Do I have any real problem areas, any tricky tangents, anything that's leading the viewer out of the painting where I don't want them to go? But you know, I would check in maybe with those things, but I wouldn't make changes. I wouldn't be willing to make changes because I'd be on the canvas doing the painting, gosh darn it, and I didn't want to backtrack. And it wasn't good. And so I started to train myself to work out those problems, to make those, first to decide what the decisions were that I needed to focus on before I hit the canvas, and then to find efficient ways to make those decisions before I got to this stage so that once I got here, I didn't have to make decisions anymore because I don't know about you, but nothing bums me out in life more than making decisions. It's kind of infuriating to me about myself. And I'm much more willing to experiment, erase, try things when I'm not here on my precious canvas. Should never be precious about canvas. You should buy the most high quality materials you can afford, of course. You should probably shy away from buying canvases that are so expensive that you are reluctant then to paint on them because that is very self-defeating. Now I'll get off my soapbox. And that's what I do. You know, I don't stretch my own canvases and I don't try to economize. My goal with all art supply buying, owning, and using is to find the thing that's the perfect intersection for me of quality for the price, meaning it's a good quality. It doesn't cause me problems when I'm using it. Because that's what inferior materials are going to do. They're going to make your painting life harder. And you will think the problem is you, very likely, which is really not good and not true most of the time. And it's the subpar materials that are causing your painting to feel hard, to feel difficult, to feel unsatisfying. So my goal is to be using materials, surfaces, brushes, paint that is affordable enough that I won't be afraid to use it, but quality enough that I will enjoy using it and I will have a good outcome. And those products are out there, I promise. They are not unicorns. They are easy to find. Raymar panels, definitely recommend. I like Blick Studio canvases too. They aren't bad and they are definitely affordable. Um, for brushes, I use Princeton Synthetics. I use the Summit series and the Aspens. And for paint, I'm dedicated to M Gram. I think it's a wonderful quality for the price. And of course, I use mediums and solvents from Gamsol. Sorry, mediums and solvents from Gamblin, which includes Gamsol, my odorless mineral spirits. And none of these things are the Rolls Royce of art supplies, but they are reliable, solid, and you'll have a good experience using them. It's so funny. I mean, I know this because I take samples of paint from M Gram to my workshops. So come join me for an in-person workshop, free paint. And students who've never tried it before are always really excited and happy because the consistency is just so nice and it's quite different than some other paints, particularly if you've been used to student grade oil paint. It's gonna be a big difference in the feeling. That creaminess, that beautiful tactile quality that makes oil paint so different than any other kind of painting. Not to say that I don't love my acrylic painters. My acrylic painters come to my workshops, take my video classes, show me beautiful work. I'm a little bit mystified by the technical aspects of acrylic paint, but people who are comfortable and happy to paint with acrylics show me beautiful things when they bring acrylics to my workshops. The most significant difference, I think, between the way I paint and the way an acrylic painter would approach my still life technique. I'm understanding that now. That's looking good. This is all in shadow. It's very dark. It's in the shadow, except for maybe this piece at the very end. It's part of this shadow. It's in the shadow that's coming out of the bowl here. There's a lot going on down here in the bottom. Maybe I don't need the stripes, but I want them. I want the stripes. If I was doing a preparatory study right now in black and white oils, in a sketchbook, I have lots of tutorials on Patreon and possibly on YouTube also of different ways that I do composition planning. Efficient ways, meaning doesn't wear me out. I'm still got energy to paint when I'm done with them. They don't take all day, but they're useful. And if I was making one of those right now, I would experiment. I would go back and forth. I would say, well, do I want the stripes or do I not want the stripes? And it's not quite so easy here on the canvas because the surface is absorbing. I'm going to just boldly go for it. If I really hate it at the end, you can stand back and hold up your hand and kind of visually block it. Close one eye. Nah, keeping them. Okay, I'm about done here. Can't really pull out a whole lot more light. Let's just check in and see if I've got any kind of extraneous marks that are going to confuse me. Handle sticking out. Handles are hard. Who else thinks handles are hard? I do. My goal when I paint little handles is always to really simplify and see how few brushstrokes I can tackle it in. How few brushstrokes can I use to say what I want to say and then get out? Because the longer I stay and mess around on those beautiful little handles, I think I flattened that ellipse a lot, but that's all right. Then the more likely I am to just overwork them, and it doesn't make them feel more accurate, it just makes them feel more awkward. So shooting for 4 or 5 brushstrokes to tell the story of the cute little handle. Oof, that shadow on the sugar is quite something. I don't know what color it is, but it's nice. It's getting a lot of the teal from the walls of the bowl. Uh-huh. Okay. And so in this stage. Now, before I move on to color, I should take a step back, take a deep breath, maybe take a picture of my underpainting, look at it outside the studio. That's always a good way to see what you've actually got going on. And what is the lost edge that's occurring there? So there is a lost edge between the stripe and the bowl over here. Very nice. Whereas over here, the bowl is much darker, so it's going to be more like that dark teal value. Checking with my lemons again. Do I have any marks that are sort of confusing me? I might just want to scrub them out. Try to scrub them out. This is all in the light. Again, that Arches oil paper isn't going to give back a lot of that pigment. Or maybe I'll scrub some out on the light side of the lemons too. I've already pre-mixed some colors. You can see on my palette I've got some colors ready to go. Ordinarily I would do an underpainting and then I would take a pause for a few minutes, 15, 20 minutes, 10, 15 minutes, mix paint. And while I was mixing the paint, my underpainting would dry, or set up anyway. It would never dry, really, but it would set up enough that I'd be able to paint right on top of it right away. And with this Arches oil paper, it's going to be ready to go immediately. I mean, I can smudge it, but it's not wet. And the whole point is I want to be working wet on wet. I want to be working on a wet underpainting. Not so wet that I'm having trouble getting the next layer to stick, but wet enough that the next layer goes on smoothly, and wet enough I get that lovely surface quality that I like to work on when I'm working Alla Prima. The point of doing an underpainting, tonal underpainting, is to lay a value foundation. Well, it's certainly to give yourself a map and a plan for where you're moving forward through the rest of the piece. Yeah, it's giving you guideposts, maybe an idea about where you want to start when you begin working in color. But really the point of this is to prop up the color you're going to put on top with a value skeleton. So you'll have darker passages under the darks, you'll have lighter passages of canvas under the lights, and because light's going to travel through the layers of your paint, that value structure underneath will just pump up the luminosity of your lights, reinforce the depth of your darks, and it'll be a good thing. Also, the reason I use this golden orange is because it lends a beautiful glow to the finished painting, really kind of lets me make that lemon a little small back there. But it's okay. I want to see the stripe through the bowl. That's a cool thing. The golden glow, it allows me to not have to put 100% opaque paint on the entire surface of this. I can leave little gaps, breathing spaces between the pieces of paint, and this golden glow will shine through and create a lovely warmth to the piece. All right, so that is an underpainting on Arches oil paper. Getting ready to slap some of this juicy paint on for my Alla Prima still life. Thanks for joining me today.